Guest on the show shortly, who's going to give us a bit of an insight into the impact that sort of fraud has on people. Obviously, it affects different people in different ways, but one thing for sure, I would imagine that people sort of probably have, maybe even like, well, they shouldn't have, but they may even feel a bit of a sense of sort of shame that they have been scammed, for example. But let's find out more from an expert. Dr. Linda Papadopoulos is going to join us on the show to give us a bit of insight into this area. So, Dr. Linda, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So, if you can just tell us a little bit about the research and how it impacts people, please.
Yeah. So, basically, the new data released today, kind of, I guess, in a nutshell, is showing that scams cost more than just money. It has a real impact on someone's mental health. So we're finding that in the region, of 60% of fraud victims really struggle with their mental health. We're talking about increased feelings of anxiety, depression, real knock-on effects on self-confidence and self-esteem. And look, I think when you're the victim of any scam, there's going to be a sense of a lot of these things, right? You feel the world is a little less safe. You feel that that you could have acted differently or done something differently. But I think in the case of these types of frauds, with these criminals that kind of call you or send you a text or engage with you online, there's that added element of, darn it, I should have known better. And I think that's the other thing that we're finding, this really insidious part of feeling almost ashamed when this happens. And that gets in the way of asking for help, asking support, and even reporting.
No, absolutely. I think that the shame should be with the people who do the scamming. To be fair, if someone's a victim, obviously, it's not easy. There's so many things. Dr. Linda, at the moment, it's easy for anyone to sort of get caught out. But I suppose, like with yourself being sort of a behavioural expert and sort of having more of an understanding, just for our listeners, I know it's not easy. Obviously, these sort of things can, impact different people. But what are some things that maybe people can sort of take in consideration? What are some of the signs? And obviously, if they have been in a situation where if they're not sure, what are some things they can do from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I think the first thing is to kind of know the signs of fraud, right? So, in many times, if we look at what happens, there's these common tactics. So people will impersonate an authority figure or a trusted voice, right? So they'll use language that's very powerful, right? So, I'm a bank manager. I'm someone from security company. We need to do this now. So that trusted voice is a big one. The other thing that they do is they use emotions, right? So they play on your emotions of fear. Oh my gosh. If you care about this person, we really need this information now. Or they play on your hope. Oh my God, act quickly now, and you'll be able to make this amount of money. So know those signs. The second one is to protect yourself. Look, we're never going to completely stop criminal activity, but we can make it harder. So doing some basic things like changing your passwords. The number looks unfamiliar, not engaging with it. But also, because we know that scams are becoming all that more with the advent of AI, all that more sophisticated, is ensuring that you're doing things like perhaps calling back someone. They say, hey, this is your friend, and the voice sounds familiar, but you're not sure. Just say, hey, I'll call you back. Having perhaps a safe word amongst family members. If someone's texting you and saying, Mom, I need help, saying, okay, what's the answer to the question? So there's a lot of things we can do. And I think the next thing is, and this is a critical one, because we found in our research a lot of this is underreported. If it does happen to you, if you've been a victim of fraud, always report it. You can do that through Action Fraud online or calling 0300 123 40 40. In Scotland, calling the police at 101. And I think finally and really critically, do not be afraid to seek help, right? If you've been affected by fraud, there really is help available out there because we know that there are these knock-on effects. So if you go to stopthinkfraud.campaign.gov.uk, we can, there's a lot of information and data out there that can really help.
No, that's been really helpful, I think, for our listeners. Some really useful tips and obviously resources to signpost them to if they're in a situation where they have been, or even if they've not been. Prevention is obviously great. I mean, just I was thinking. I mean, with your experience, obviously, sort of like you got a lot. Of, you sort of a behavioural expert. And I mean, there's people out there sort of. I know it's going to affect different people in different ways. It depends on what they've lost. Depends on their circumstances, and of course, no doubt it's going to cause people, or at least contribute to causing people anxiety, possibly even depression if they've lost a vast amount of money. But if there's anyone sort of like suffering in silence, Dr. Linda, what and then they might feel a bit ashamed to sort of speak to someone because they think they might be ashamed to say that they got caught out by one of these sort of scammers, which are for the most part a lot of them can be very sophisticated in the way they operate, and it's hard to to pick them out. But what would you say to them? I mean, what if they're feeling a bit not so sure about opening up and talking about how they feel after being a victim?
Absolutely, that's a great question. I think the main thing is you are a victim here. This is not your fault. It's really difficult. These have become so sophisticated. And the way that you feel kind of, I guess, empowered is to understand that this happened to you. You didn't cause it. There's no I should have known better. I could have. These things, are becoming ubiquitous. They're all over the place just because they're so sophisticated. So I guess for me, for anyone out there listening, I want you to feel entitled to ask for help, to seek support. This is not something that you brought upon you. In the same way, if you're walking down the street and someone grabbed your wallet or pickpocketed you or took your bag, you wouldn't be like, oh, it was my fault. No, these are criminals. It's their fault. And unless we speak out, unless, we all start kind of talking about how they're happening and kind of, I guess, preempting it, we're not going to get to the point where more people are protected. So you're not just protecting yourself, but you're protecting those around you by doing it. And then critically, from a psychological point of view, by seeking support and asking for that, you actually do protect yourself as well. We know the knock-on mental effects can be huge. We know actually if you are struggling with mental and emotional health, if you're very low, if you're very anxious, you might actually be more likely to fall prey. So that the notion of getting support and help is critical here.
No, absolutely. That's sort of some great points, and I think people listening to that, at least they have some sense of awareness that there is help out there, and it's not obviously not their fault. I mean, sort of outside the scope of the conversation, maybe a conversation for another day. One thing I was thinking about, Dr. Linda, is that the psychology around people who do this sort of thing. I mean, that's probably a whole different topic for another day, but I just sort of think. I get this sort of sense that, I mean, the psychology behind people who go out and sort of, them, plan these sort of sophisticated sort of scams, really. I mean, it seems to me it's more than just, say, an opportunist. There may be opportunists out there, but these seem to me, from what I've read and what I've heard, really sophisticated sort of crime rackets that people have, planned meticulously. Is that a fair point to make, that some of them are that way? They actually sort of, they're really well planned and thought through?
Absolutely. Look, sometimes this is not just a random person on the other side of the screen. This can be, to your point, groups of people, that plan these things, that research them, that think out, that have scripts for how to speak to you and the way to make you feel anxious and vulnerable. So, yes, this is not kind of, in most cases, like a basic, let me just see what sticks. And I think it's precisely for that reason as well that I want people that may have, fallen victim to these perpetrators, to these criminals, to feel entitled to kind of say, hey, this happened to me. Because the more we know, the more we're able to protect ourselves, of course.
Absolutely. And do you think, I mean, I know it's hard because everyone's sort of different and everyone's on a different sort of there's no two people the same, but I mean, the people who do this sort of thing, Doctor, have they got any sort of compassion about them? I mean, obviously they target pretty much anybody and everybody, to be fair. I mean, I'm not suggesting that, there's a specific type of person they should target, but there are vulnerable people out there that are struggling. The world, all over the world, people are struggling financially and it's not easy for people to make ends meet. I mean, I just wonder sometimes, do these people have an ounce of sort of compassion and think, you know what, but am I sort of missing a trick there? I mean, I know it's hard to sort of say, but they just seem really ruthless to me. They really do. They seem really ruthless. That there's not a shred of compassion to target people who are vulnerable, who are struggling.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, again, like to speak to why this happens, I guess the psychology of people that are doing this oftentimes has to do with kind of not seeing their victims as vulnerable, trying to kind of minimize it, not even kind of thinking of them as whole human beings. It's just about what they can get as opposed to what they're destroying. But I think it's precisely for this reason that anyone out there listening today kind of feels entitled, to not pile on themselves. Because again, that's what we see. It happens to people and they're like, oh my God, I shouldn't have, and I could have done something differently. No, to your point, the people on the other end of the screen, the other end of the phone, the other end of the computer are usually, out there to do you harm, and you shouldn't by any means, feel that you are in any way complicit or responsible. You are the exact opposite. You've fallen victim, and you need to ask and gain the support that you need.
100%. I think that's some really good input there. And people doing this sort of thing, if they just stop and think that that it's obviously someone's sort of, could be someone's sort of grandparent on the pension. It could be a single parent sort of struggling or battling away. Not that I'm suggesting that it's good for anybody, irrespective of how wealthy or what their circumstances are. But if they just stop and think for a moment that obviously sort of like if this was to happen to them type thing, and I think in the world if we just had a bit more sort of compassion, then it'd be a better place. But there are a lot of good people out there, and obviously people like yourself, Dr. Linda, who's sort of spreading the message. And I think it's easy to sort of forget there are a lot of good people and organisations out there that are there to help. And I suppose my guess is it is a minority, but a minority big enough to do a lot of damage. So just to remind people, where can they go to find some more information, please, Dr. Linda?
Yes, great. So for more information on this, on how to protect yourself from fraud and basically trying to stay ahead of these scams, if you visit stopthinkfraud.campaign.gov.uk, you'll find a lot of wonderful information there.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for your time. It's been really interesting speaking to you, very informative, and thanks for providing the extra information that the listeners can go and check out if they are in a situation, or even if they're not in a situation, just to sort of read and learn more about it. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. You too.
Thank you.